Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm dear darling, as you can see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhollow today, where we're entering another hot period, I suppose, here in the UK. And I don't know if it's actually classified as a heat wave, this one, but, you know, it's getting pretty hot. Not quite like the 40 degrees hot we had a couple of months ago. I honestly don't really recall. It's been a while, but yeah, we're sort of vibing today. I played some Steven sausage roll, made some okay progress, I would say. I don't really know how well I'm doing sort of a roll in Steven sausage roll. No, normally I rely on one or two people who like leave comments who've played through the entire game, like, and bringing up like tidbits about it. But no one's doing up for Steven sausage roll currently, so I don't really know. I have nothing to really judge my way for it, and also I haven't checked my comments in a while anyway. But hello everyone. Right now in Fawnhallow, it's 5:07 PM on Friday, August 12th, 2022. Actually, no, I didn't I check them last Saturday? Maybe. I can't remember. I normally try and check them on Saturday morning, but sometimes I forget, so I apologise. Yeah, what should we talk about today? I don't know. What's an interesting thing? I was watching Riot Arcane behind the scenes sort of like documentary that they've been making. Like if you want to know what my thoughts are on Riot Games, what Riot Games is, TV show Arcane. Long and short, loved it. Loved the themes, loved the characters. It was fantastic. It's probably one of the best looking things, like animated shows I've seen, and I have a whole episode I think of Animal Crossing when I was discussing over it because it's really good, I would say. But recently Riot Games have been releasing like sort of like documentary series about like what went into the behind the scenes of making Riot Arcane, how it came to be, how it almost nearly didn't come to be, etc, etc, etc. And it's been vastly entertaining, I think, because I've been interested in of course, you know, like animation, media and that sort of thing, and like cartoons, I suppose. But I mean, it's not like that. I suppose Arcane isn't a cartoon to a certain degree, like it's a 3D animated, but with like 2D cartoony animations over top. But calling it cartoon just sounds misleading, so I guess animation. And interesting animation development and all that sort of thing. I find it very interesting, and just seeing how it all unfolded. How even though Riot Games, obviously, they're not in this small indie company anymore, they're like massive. They're an absolute titan in the gaming space. Seeing how even they were like all the business struggles, I suppose, behind the scenes of it was interesting to say the least, and especially the struggles of like the creative directors being like how come it's come to be, and like how it came to the clashes and etc etc, and just, you know, the whole process behind it. It's a lot of things that you don't usually get to see because, you know, a lot of people aren't, a lot of the times they're not like transparent documentaries behind this necessarily. Sorry, taking a sip of water. Of course, right, it would be sort of remiss if they didn't make a documentary series about it. I'm sure they planned it from the beginning to actually make a documentary series about it, but it's also, they'd be remiss to, I suppose, miss out on that sort of opportunity of creating it because, you know, it was such a smash hit success, like unbelievably so, probably to an extent that I don't know if anyone could have predicted it, so much so that people who like didn't even watch League, didn't even know about League, started watching it and were like, oh, I'm going to start playing League, and then probably mildly regretted it, or maybe not, I don't know, maybe they thoroughly enjoyed it. Who am I to judge someone who's played League for like 12 years now? Oh my god, it's so long. Yeah, and it's really interesting to see the behind the scenes development of it. I will say a lot of it, I would like to see more of the literal behind the scenes of, you know, seeing storyboarding, seeing like not the scratch arts, but like scratch voices, seeing the development sketches as things behind it, but maybe that's something which will come in later, because right now it's more about the process of the ideation of the entire thing in the first place, about, you know, like coming up with the story ideas, trying to figure out exactly how they're going to do it, and, you know, the setbacks they faced. Like, I didn't know they had a huge setback where they were going to do it, and then it was just like, yeah, this really sucks, this entire plot, there's no way we can let this go. And then we were just like, oh, what we can do, we hired all these animators and we just made a load of animation things, and we had another attempt like 2 years later. This time they hired some more people, not only did they have a core team of like writers again, but they hired some more people with like more experience as well to be able to help like sort of guide them and give them pointers, and it was pretty cool. You know, it's only 2 episodes thus far, but I don't know how many episodes there'll be in total. I'm gonna guess 6. Just a wild random guess out there. Yeah, and honestly, I think it's been rather entertaining to see that sort of unfold. Give it a watch if you've seen Riot Arcane. If you haven't seen it, then maybe only give it a watch if you're particularly interested in the sort of development of like animation or like any sort of TV series in general, maybe. I don't really know. It's kind of up to you, isn't it? But yeah, I don't really know where I was going with this, to be perfectly honest. But I think it was a pretty cool thing to watch. All these like documentary series, always, you know, like long video. It's not really long video essay things, because long video essays are like 3 hours to 2 hours long. Did I talk about the fact that when I the Defunctland video about the Disney fast track passes. I must have talked about it when I first watched it. Like, that was a very entertaining watch as well, in the sort of like video essay category. Amount of research which must go into these things is absolutely crazy. You're wondering what hairstyle am I wearing today? Well, I'm wearing this hairstyle which I saw. Just basically, this is like a hard pivot because you had nothing else to really say about that sort of thing, so we're just sort of trying to find out conversational grounds. I'm doing, double French crowns, back to the back of my head, tied up in pigtails. And when I saw this thing where you take your pigtails, or just anything like ponytails, but you need 2 of them in general, and then you twist them like in one direction, say clockwise, both of them in one direction clockwise, then you twist them around each other. So sorry, let me explain this. If you have like the 2 pigtails, you take the first pigtail, twist it like in a clockwise direction, so it sort of spirals, and then do the same with the other one. And then with your 2 spirals, you twist them together, but you twist them anti-clockwise. You like combine them anti-clockwise together, and you tie it off at the end. And it's meant to like hold really well, despite the fact they're just twists. And I've done that with my hair because I was experimenting, and it still held pretty well, I think, surprisingly so. I didn't know that's how it works, but I guess it makes sense because one way it's trying to unwind clockwise, but it's trying to also unwind anti-clockwise other way. So that sort of like tension, the opposite tension that they have to each other, keeps it in place. I don't really know. Yeah, I mean, that's my hairstyle for today, I suppose. It's not the most interesting one. I'm not fiddling with pins or anything, which is quite nice. I don't know. That's not a very interesting thing to talk about. Well, what can we talk about today? What other sort of anything big happening? Anything like wild, crazy? I don't. I'm still like racking my brain. Do I got any interesting stories that I wanted to talk about? Not really. I don't think there's been anything particularly interesting. You might be like, how's that VTuber avatar that you're working on coming along? I didn't work on it yesterday, so nothing's really changed. How's the kids? I don't have any kids, so I suppose that sort of answers your question. I don't really know. But this is where we go to r/games and we see what new games are being released, and we can sort of talk about conversational things on there. See, Final Fantasy 14, sure. That's coming out. Genshin Impact got like a big trailer coming out. It was pretty cool. It was like animated in classical 2D anime sort of style. Square Enix, Path of Exile. Music games I don't play, so I can't really comment on them. Cody's Dream Buffet. Oh, Cult of the Lamb. I forgot about that. Yeah, Cult of the Lamb has been released rather recently. I don't know if it's a game I'll play. It was a game I got my eye on because I like the art style, but I believe it's a roguelite, and I'm not super into a lot of roguelites and that sort of thing. Like, the only one that I was really into was Binding of Isaac for a while, and then I just got kind of bored of it. I even have a lot of other ones. Maybe not a lot of other ones. I mean, I've got like Risk of Rain. I actually played a decent amount of Risk of Rain, I'll be honest. I have both Crypt and Necrodancer and whatchamacallit? Oh, what's it called? Enter the Gungeon. I have not played them all that often. I've not played much of them, so I'm not particularly good at them, and I don't have a huge drive to actually play more of them, I suppose, in the first place, which is, you might seem a bit strange, because roguelites are very popular, and especially if I really like Binding of Isaac. Why didn't I play the others? I don't really know. I think Binding of Isaac is sort of one which like got grandfathered in with why I play it in the first place, because I played it like very close, not close to its original release. Actually, did I play its original release? I don't think so. When it first got released on Rebirth, it was basically one of the first big games I played, and of course, I watched Northern 9, not at that time, but a little bit later on, to try and get better at it. So I played a lot of that at the time, back when there weren't as many games I had to play. And then Enter the Gungeon and Crypt of a Necrodancer came in a lot later into my sort of gaming life. I don't really know how to describe it, I suppose, but I discovered him a lot later on. By that time I already played quite a lot of Binding of Isaac, and I was like, oh, maybe I'm curious to reach out to other roguelites and that sort of thing, and I tried him, and I was like, I don't have anything against him, but I guess I'm sort of becoming more and more aware that maybe roguelites aren't quite my style of game, or maybe they are, but not in this way. and I can't exactly pinpoint why, and I think it's probably just a case where it's sort of like just due to the structure of the game itself. I like subconsciously don't have the drive to continue playing it, I suppose is how to describe it. Because a lot of the other games, like like story games, puzzle-based games, they have a definitive start and a definitive end. They're not like replayable in the sense that you replay them to get new experiences. You replay them to relive the same experiences, but perhaps relive them differently. That's like the whole point. You know, you pick like different parts in the story. You don't really replay puzzle games, but you know, if you do, fair enough, I suppose. Wait, was one of them chop wood? I did not pay enough attention to that. Okay, well, chop wood, hit rocks. We can do that. But roguelikes is like, there's not really much in way of a start. Well, I mean, there's always a start because you got to start somewhere. But the end isn't necessarily the end of like the actual end. Like you might argue the end is when you've unlocked everything in the game, in which case you might be like, well, that takes a super long time, I suppose, in the first place, and that's not really the end of a roguelike. That's kind of like the mid end, you know, the first end. That's kind of like a lot of the times when the games really start to, you know, that's when the game's like reach its full potential. You know, like Binding of Isaac, you know, having access to all of the items means you can do the sort of like roguelike runs as you see fit. The problem with that is when I think about, you know, I guess the way I play games tends to be very much sort of like achievement based. Like, well, once I'm doing it with a specific goal in mind. I suppose once it's become an open-ended goal, and something about that makes me lose interest. It's sort of like fun for the sake of fun. I don't want to do that. Obviously, that's not quite how it works out, but it's sort of just like something subconscious when it's sort of like I like the satisfaction of feeling like I've reached the end. You know, even when I've played like a really good story game or like engaged with any sort of really good story, and then I've reached the end and I'm just dying. I just like, please, just a little bit more. I loved it so much. I know, like deep inside me, I'm actually very satisfied that it's come to the end, and then even if the end has left me wanting more, that's kind of a sensation I want to deal with. Well, roguelikes, I suppose, don't really have that. There's not really like a sense of ending with a roguelike, which I'm not saying is good or bad. I'm just saying how this interacts with me personally, or why I haven't actually played much of Gungeon and Necrodancer. I think part of it is also like I wasn't particularly as gripped as I thought I'd be with Enter the Gungeon. Not that I don't think it's a good game, but I don't think it's as a game really for me. I played it and I was like, yeah, it's not. I'm not like, oh man, I absolutely love all this. I'm like, it's kind of cool, I guess. But Crypt and Necrodancer, I think, like, if you knew me much more personally, you'd probably be like, yeah, if I were to bet Dear Darling played any roguelike, it would be Crypt and Necrodancer. Like, it seems so obvious. I love music games. I love things of like, you know, I like music a lot in general, and all that sort of thing, and something which incorporates, I love strange sort of gimmicks and crossovers and combinations of these sort of things. You would have thought Crypto and Necrodancer would be exactly what I like. It would be my favourite roguelike. And you probably would not say Binding of Isaac. You're like, I do like horror-esque elements, of course, but, you know, I don't particularly like grotesque elements, which Binding of Isaac definitely sort of, not praise upon, but leans on quite a lot for its own aesthetic. Binding of Isaac is also quite, you know, there was not much, I suppose, overarching strategy necessarily in the first place. I had this conversation with my friend, and she was like discussing with me, and we were trying to figure out, I was like, why I definitively like Binding of Isaac. And the answer I came up with at the time was maybe I don't really like strategy as much in my roguelike games in the first place. I like the reactionary strategy, like with Binding of Isaac, where it's like I had to make a best of a bad situation rather than I've planned out my let me take a sip of water. Because Binding of Isaac, like, she argues from her point, she doesn't engage with it, she doesn't like it because all of it is very reactionary. There's no like sense of agency necessarily, except for on the mechanical level. She doesn't feel like she has much of a sense of strategy where you can like sort of plan, you know, set yourself up for like good things in future, except from a mechanical level. There's no like sort of strategy being like, this is how like I divvy up like stat points or something maybe, or like this is how I choose to build or curate my run, like in Save Aspire, which I think we were comparing at the time. Obviously, we're all saying this, and this discussion was definitely from a point of like, we got different opinions, and we're just sort of like trying to delve in deeper, trying to find like the fundamental ideas why. But I think the comparison came to Save Aspire, where it's like, it really is about tailoring your run, even though there is there's an element of like reactionary based decision making for it. Of course, like you have to make your decisions like based on these elements. You have a lot more control over exactly how the shape of each of your runs goes. When in Binding of Isaac, sort of like you have a very binary sort of choice. You either take item or don't take item, and 90% of the time you take the item unless it's detrimental, and then you don't take the item. And I suppose the discussion there, I was wondering, it's like, why does that necessarily appeal to me? Because that doesn't necessarily line up to the sort of other things I necessarily like in a game. And I suppose I don't really have a good way of explanation, but I had a few theories. One of them being like, I think I prefer, when the game comes to a mechanical game like a roguelike in the first place, I prefer to focus on that mechanical element than necessarily the overarching strategy element. And also maybe a sub point about maybe I don't like overarching strategy as much as I think I do, and I think that's probably true. I'm not like I have no desire to play things like XCOM, or I'm trying to think of other sort of games, or any sort of like StarCraft 2 or that sort of thing. They just straight up don't appeal to me. Like no part of them am I like even if they had different, maybe if they had different aesthetics I like them, but those sort of like strategy games in a sense don't appeal to me. I don't like, if my friends didn't play Civilization, I would have never bought Civilization, and I never would have played it. Like, I've played it a couple of times by myself, but I never got that feeling that people got of like, one more turn, just one more turn. I got it for like an hour and being like, oh yeah, this is fun. Like, I liked the idea of like building something up, like through that sort of structure. But in that case, I should probably just play like a city simulator or something, shouldn't I? I like the idea of building things up, but like the actual strategy, trying to like conquer or like trying to win or something in the end, I'm just like, that doesn't really appeal to me in the end. So I think part of it is I don't like overarching strategy all that much. So since Binding of Isaac takes a lot of that sort of like planning-based strategy and turns it much more into reaction-based strategy, I think that appeals to me more, because part of things I do like is doing things much more reactionary. I like being like, okay, I'm basically forced into using these sort of items. What's the best I can do with these sort of items? Because it's sort of, I suppose it makes me make the best out of a bad situation. It makes me be creative, like go with gimmicks, and makes me try new things, I suppose, in that sense, which is kind of why I like Binding of Isaac. I take all the items, I'm like, this is what the run has given me, I'm going to do the best I can with what I've got, and that sort of thing, rather than sort of being like, I want to optimise what I've got, being like, oh, you know, the run's starting to steer from this direction, I think I'll try and construct this archetype to have it, and bring that to fruition. So that's my assumption of why I like Binding of Isaac, but I also think there is an element of it being grandfathered in, as I touched on before, the fact it was just a game I played a lot earlier on, you know, so, you know, I just have a lot of knowledge built in the first place, and once you have knowledge in any sort of like strategy-esque game, or any game with any sort of like high skill floor, or like with a tall skill ceiling, once you get all that knowledge, it's a lot more fun and engaging on the game that way, because you have more things to sort of like interact with. At least that's the way I see it, compared to, you know, like the fun part being the learning process. I think it's also a conversation I had with a friend. The fun part is not necessarily the learning process for me. I'm not saying the learning process can't be fun, and I'm not saying that I, you know, hate it or anything like that. I do like to learn things, but I think I'm doing it for a reward, that once I've learned and mastered what I've done, what I can do with the new abilities I have is really the most fun part. And I suppose, I don't know, that kind of makes it a bit of a high wall to climb over, to engage with roguelikes, being like, oh, you know, especially if it's not something I'm used to, being like, oh, I've got like a steep hill to climb to really like get used to all the new mechanics or all the new information that I had to learn about it in the first place, you know? That's my assumption, at least about why Binding of Isaac might appeal to me more than other games. And it's not like those elements I talked about in Binding of Isaac don't appear in other roguelikes or other sort of things, but I guess it's just a combination of them all together, and the way it's done in Binding of Isaac appeals to me a bit more. But anyway, I have said so often that I should try Crypt and Necrodancer. I know when a few of my viewers definitely play, you know, one of the Cavalcadance, I believe, plays it quite a lot, which is, you know, completely fair enough. And it's always like a sort of thing where I'm like, oh, I've been meaning to try it, or like give it another shot again, but I just haven't. I don't know why. And I suppose it's sort of compounded by the fact nowadays I'm much more sort of like stories and aesthetics driven. We're just going to sort of fish because we've got really nothing else to do, I think, mission wise. I'm really sort of like story and aesthetic driven nowadays, and character like focused things are my favourite. So when a game has a stronger like appeal on the mechanics and the sort of the underlying systems, it doesn't necessarily appeal to me as much in the actual gameplay sense. It appeals to me in like a game design sense, you know, like the game designer part of me is like, oh, I wonder why, you know, they made it like this, etc, 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 and like breaking down the systems, trying to figure out exactly why they're chosen, but actually interacting and engaging with it from like a consumer standpoint is not so, you know, engaging to me. I much prefer like story-based things. Like, even, you know, I mean, it's part of the reason why I play some of the gacha games I do. Is it because I have an addictive personality and I like to gamble or anything like that? No, not really. If anything, I'm quite the opposite. I like things to be safe or anything. I when I play gacha games, and, you know, it's quite perhaps subversive effect. I don't pull unless I have a guarantee. Sometimes. Sometimes, you know, like live it low a little bit, but most of the times I don't pull unless I have a guarantee or a really good chance. You know, I come at things with a very statistical mind point, which is good for catch games, certainly. But a lot of them I play for the story because I like the characters, even if I haven't engaged with all the story or all the characters, because there's an overwhelming amount. Things like Project Sakai, Shiny Colors, especially on Genshin Impact, with 3 very story-focused gacha games in the end. Even if I haven't engaged all of them, the idea that it's there for me to engage with at some point is, I suppose, engaging in of itself. And that's what makes it fun to me. Even though mechanically you'd argue they're not most exciting games in the world. I mean, like one of them is just a rhythm game. The other is like an okay, not an okay, but like a pretty kind of cool, like, I don't know, like character building game, character manager sort of game, but obviously tied in all gacha elements means that strategies are sort of like paywalled. And the other one is a kind of cool like exploration based game where, and honestly the gacha elements are, you know, they are there and they are quite strong, I would say, but like the need to pull for them is significantly less because there's not really much of a sense of a competitive element to those sort of games, to Genshin that is. But really it's the story and the aesthetics that keep me going, you know, seeing like character design, seeing like official art, etc, makes it engaging, I mean, in that sense. And maybe that's why, you know, oh hello Soft Shell Turtle, maybe that's why I haven't quite interfaced with a lot of these roguelites in the same aspect, because roguelites, obviously, the focus on them by definition is meant to be the mechanics. That's what people like to focus on, mechanics. It's what, you know, I'm sure if you did like a survey of like what people who play roguelites, their favourite thing about roguelites is, it's going to be mechanics or whatever. Like crisp mechanics are far more important than almost anything in a roguelite, right? Because you're going to be playing it over and over and over again. You're going to be interfacing with those mechanics over and over and over again. You better make sure they're good and enjoyable, right? But often of times, if it's an indie game, you're going to have to do something which scales up pretty nicely, something which can, you know, you can create iterative levels with, something which you can create like a whole slew of like different items and sprites or whatever for in the first place. You can't afford to have like everything animated like, I don't know, off the top of my head, but you can't have everything like Life is Strange. I don't know why that's the first thing came to mind. You can't have everything like that, like custom animations, because you don't know how things are going to look necessarily. You don't have total control over exactly how things will look all the time. You've just got to sort of have things which will work no matter exactly how they might appear. And a lot of times, because they're also indie games as well, you're going to have to make compromises here and there, where you're going to have to make things like a graphics system which is a little bit more easier and more in scope for the budget you have. And a lot of the times that tends to end up being like pixel art, 8-bit style, and that sort of thing. I don't have anything against a pixel art or 8-bit style, but I think it's a combination of just pixel art combined with not much story focused like mechanics sided gameplay, which sort of dissuades me off a game in the first place, because I'm totally fine with pixel art. I mean, like Undertale was entirely pixel art and it's my favourite game of all time, but that's because the focus was not on the graphics or the mechanics necessarily. It was much more focused on the story that it told and the way it told it, right? So I mean, all of this is just like sort of flimsy justification for why I haven't given it another shot. At some point I should definitely give it a shot, especially because, as I understand now, Crypt and Necrodancer has a co-op mode or something, right? And some of my friends, they play a lot of Crypt and Necrodancer, and they've very said before, it's like, you should play it, it seems like a game you would like. And I'm like, it does seem like a game I'd like, but I just haven't. I don't really know why. I don't really have a good reason. And I'm finding increasingly more and more nowadays is also the sort of thing like, when I want to recreationally play video games, the only games I play will be probably the games I record for my YouTube channel. Sometimes I'll play a bit of League of Legends. Like recently I've been playing a bit more League of Legends because the Star Guardian event has drawn me back into it. And you might be like, the Star Guardian event, really? Hasn't that been like a total flop of an event? Yeah, kind of, but I like Star Guardians. And I was kind of interested in the story because they call me hook, line and sinker. They drew me in with like a really well written like twin stars, like a story based event. I'm being like, oh man, they're bringing back the visual novel thing. I can't wait to see what it's like. Visual novel was okay. The event itself is not like that engaging, I will particularly say, like from a actual gameplay standpoint. But I like the characters and the skins, so you know, sue me, I suppose. So a lot of the times when it comes to recreation playing games, I don't really play much outside of games I'm recording for my YouTube channel. Because and out of like League of Legends, and sometimes my gacha games or whatever. But most of the times, like I play the gacha games while simultaneously doing something else because for some reason my brain can't do anything but multitask. A strict refusal to have any inefficiency in my life, as comes back to bite me every so often. But yeah, I forgot what I was going to say about this. So going out to play a new game is also sort of like intimidating in its own right, and also like it's a sort of game I don't know if I would ever play on my channel because it doesn't have really a definitive end. Is a weird part, which is why I do want to start streaming. So because I do want to start playing some of those games because I think streams are a really good place for playing games which don't have a definitive end. You can just like replay them whenever. You can pick them up whenever, right? There's no need to remember the story as they go along. You just need to remember mechanics, and the mechanics will come back to you pretty quickly. I'd say. So maybe that will happen if I start streaming, like learning Crypt or Necrodancer. But I also don't know if it's particularly entertaining to watch someone struggle at a new game. I don't know. So at some point, I'm gonna have to sit down and really think about what games would I play on my stream. It's actually my first stream, and that's got to be something big, surely. Or maybe not. I don't really know. But anyway, I'm gonna round off this episode here. I think so. There's sort of a dip into roguelikes and that sort of thing. Will roguelikes ever be on this channel? I think the highest chance of one being on this channel would be either a stream VOD or Crypt of a Necrodancer, just because I've talked about it so much and I've been told so many times I would probably love it. I have not gotten around to it yet. I don't know when I call the definitive endpoint, but I don't know basically. So we'll just sort of have to see how it goes. But anyway, if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm my dear darling. Any likes, comments, subscriptions, shares are greatly appreciated. Join my dear darling Discord, follow me on Twitter down below. Hope we see each other again, but for now it's our farewell. So until next time, bye bye for now.